But with your collection of $1 million from the Carnegie Corporation, you might fall into that high tax grouping along with him. So congratulations.
Well, thank you. It was a really great week. It was nice to get the final award notice. And,
That's great.
The most important part of that is the work that it will enable us to do across the country in the education space. I mean, what do we need to innovate more in our education system? Right? If we're going to create a better future, if you have to pick one place, let's not just tweak, but let's transform our education system all the way from preschool to K through 12 to post-secondary into workforce development.
Absolutely.
To help people at every step along the way become confident and relevant to the rapidly changing world and economy we live in. And so this grant money really helps us catalyze and move that idea forward. How do we connect the dots between a lot of the really good innovation work that's happening, but the right hand never seems to talk to the left hand.
Yeah,
right. Everybody thinks they know how to fix it, and we're not thinking about it as a system. It's a systems challenge. It's going to require system solutions, and we're not very good at that. So thank you. It was a nice
great.
week.
Yeah, it's great.
For us.
It's great news, and it really speaks to the work that you guys are doing over there, the level of funders and partners that you're developing, whether it's Gates Foundation or Carnegie or listen, I don't know a lot about Carnegie. All I know is Vartan Gregorian runs the place, and he's one of literally the most. He could be the Dos Equis guy, the most interesting man in the world.
And he had to sign off personally on this grant, so it's nice to know he's paying attention to all the large grants that get made out of the Carnegie Foundation in New York. So we're grateful for that. They're great partners. We've worked with them a number of times over the years, but this is the largest grant that we've received from them. And again, it's what's more rewarding than working innovation in the education space.
I spoke to him about almost a year and a half ago, right after Buddy Cianci had died, and did an interview with him. We were on the phone. I knew him when he was at Brown, and we were probably on the phone for an hour. And just one of, just so smart, so clever, so worldly. I mean, if there's a language he doesn't speak, it doesn't matter. He's just... And in his career, he has touched and influenced just about everything.
Well, I've never met him. I certainly know of him. I knew he was here in Rhode Island.
He was
I wasn't at
tremendous
the time.
when he
Bigger
was
than
here.
life, right? I understand that he can enter into a conversation about almost anything.
Literally.
And way more than Carrie his weight in the conversation.
Yeah.
So that's a cool talent.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It's nice to see him doing what he's doing now, right? Because they really make a difference. And so we're grateful for it.
He has a good resume. He's done a few.
He has an okay resume.
Yeah, he has a good resume.
Yes,
he's one of those Daniel Patrick Moynihan resumes. So let's talk a little bit about Rhode Island on the cutting edge of innovation. Here we are, Rhode Island, top ranked in everything. Let's skip this year.
Did you fix the budget problem with Gary? You guys had it? I mean, what is it? It's July 10th, right? Am I right?
It is July 10th.
I checked this morning. I think it's July 10th. We have no state budget.
We have no state budget.
That's unbelievable.
We have no leaders.
Right.
How could we have a budget if we have no leaders?
I'm not going to go that far, but the fact that we have no state budget is incredible. I mean, it's the one thing they do up there. That's the one thing. I mean, if you think about it, sometimes they pass legislation outside of the budget, but 90% of what they do out there all heads towards one piece of legislation called the budget, with the articles in the budget. Almost everybody, is hunkered down trying to figure out.
Almost every piece of major legislation is inserted into the budget.
In the budget, it's all about. Now, it
that
shouldn't be that way.
No,
the budget should be really important, but it shouldn't be policy solely through what line item is in or out of the budget. But that's the way it is up there. So to not pass the budget, leaves you scratching your head. I don't know. What do you, I'm sure you've been talking about this. I look at it, having spent a little bit of time up there. what does the Senate President want? Because I don't believe for 1 second he's doing this just to make a point.
Listen, as all of us go through life, we do recognize that your word is your bond.
Right.
So, the Speaker is emphatic that he had an agreement with the Senate President. The Senate President denies that. It certainly looked by all evidence that there was an agreement. The bill came over, it went to Senate Finance. It was adopted in about 4 seconds in Senate Finance. The chairman of Senate Finance, who was hand-picked to run that committee by the Senate President, issued a statement saying this is a great and wonderful budget, let's move passage. It then sparks chaos. So I think that the Speaker is probably correct that there was some violation on an agreement. Now, you don't know if there were other contingencies on that agreement. I'll do this for you if you do that, or what other factors are. There seems to now be, we've just entered into chest-pounding bravado and machismo, which does not seem to be demonstrating great leadership.
Which isn't helpful for any of the people that are left in limbo around what the budget ends up being or not being. But I come back and I look at it and say there's something either I'm not getting or that we don't know yet.
Right.
Well, because I still do not believe that the Senate President pulled this.
Yeah.
Right. Leave aside whether there was or wasn't an agreement. Right. Certainly the precedent was always, the House does the budget, the Senate goes along. There was always some backroom negotiation to try to make sure stuff was snuck in there or not. But to do this at the last minute, I don't believe this was just on principle. Am I right? The Senate President, President Ruggiero, is the longest standing on either side of the House or the Senate, right? Has anyone been there longer than that?
I don't believe so. There's a few in that range. Ruggiero, Anastasia Williams.
I think he might be the longest in either the Senate or the House. So, needless to say, this guy's seen a few rodeos before.
He has been there before.
And so I don't believe that he's doing this just because he's making a principled point. There's something that he or the constituency he's serving wants, and that hasn't been made clear to us yet. So maybe we'll see that in the end game. I know the press and everyone's trying to scratch underneath it to try to figure it out. Somebody thought they came up with the right answer last week. But it turns out that probably wasn't it. So we'll see. I don't have any insight into it, but as a citizen, kind of who likes to observe it, right? I think it's interesting that the Senate would finally assert itself, and say, hey, we're here. We play a role in this, and that's unusual here in Rhode Island. But you bring it back to what does it mean for us as citizens? In the end, we've got to have a budget. I've been watching what went on in Illinois, and how long that took, to settle this thing. And how do you move forward? I think part of the problem here is I'll try to take it back into the innovation space, which I always do. You can't do anything new here because in a tough budget environment, it's all about protecting and saving what we've always done, whether it's the right stuff to continue to do or not. So to try to get something new, some new program, some new idea in is really hard in this environment. And we live in a time here in Rhode Island and across the country where we've got to do a lot of things new and a lot of things different. And so we've got to change this game about how we go, if not to all the way to zero-based budgeting where we start from scratch each year and everybody needs to justify their expenditures, but how about some portion of the resources, with intention explicitly goes to opening up the space for exploration, new ideas, things that can help us not only today, but can get us better positioned for tomorrow.
Well, I will say this, Sunland's budget process was, and these were difficult economic times, were cuts on tiers. Each department was left to it. They had to identify a 5% cut, a 15% cut, and a 20% cut. And you had to be able to live within it. So some departments might get cut 20%, and then the money might go to build a new airport or a convention center or things like that. So there was a little more sophistication in the budgeting process during that period of time.
Well, it takes both discipline
Right,
and structure
and
to
vision.
do that, but it also takes, yes, it takes vision. I'm big on that. You know, I always talk about, you know, having a clear vision, but it takes political will.
Yeah,
It takes the
absolutely.
use of political capital to be able to use the leverage that you have in order to carve out the space, you know, for something new and something different. And if we don't do more of that, we're going to continue to we'll pedal the bicycle.
Yeah.
You know, and right now the macro economy isn't terrible. The unemployment rate is reasonably low. You know, and so these are times where politicians like to claim, "Look at how great my programs are," you know, because the unemployment
But it
rate
is
is
an
low. But
unusual-
there's some structural
That's right.
problems that we've got to deal with that aren't positioning us well for the future.
One of the things that's very unusual about this budget process is the revenues came in decreasing at a period of time where I think most people recognize that the
Right.
economy is improving to some degree.
Right.
And unemployment has continued to drop,
Yeah.
housing prices continue to go up. Those are all indicators that revenue would grow, but in fact, revenue decreased by, you know, a couple percent, and the expectation is will continue to decrease. So that's a little aberration from.
And some of that's the mix that's been changing over time.
Absolutely.
Right? If you have fewer high-wage jobs, you know, that makes a huge difference,
Yeah.
you know, in your tax revenues. And if you have businesses that aren't growing, you know, as quickly, and you don't have fresh economic, you know, development and companies that are growing and creating those high-wage jobs, you're not creating the lifeblood of any government,
No.
which is new revenue sources. So what are you left with? You've got to find ways to squeeze people with more taxes.
Well,
You've
listen,
gotta
we've got
find
two,
ways to get
and
more
we've got two
fees.
big threats.
Yep.
Healthcare, diminishing
Oh,
size of
huge.
healthcare in the state of Rhode
Yep.
Island, good paying jobs, well educated. There's gonna be less of them now than there were
Right.
before. Somewhere around Care New England has cut in the last 2 years, 1,500, 2,000, depending on which job
Right.
numbers. Those probably average $100,000 a
Those
year.
are all great jobs. Yeah.
And retail. Let's talk retail. Prime, Amazon
Yeah.
says today that Prime is up 30%
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
subscriptions.
so more of the disruption that's happening in the retail space. You know, we talked about the Amazon acquisition offer for Whole Foods and the ripples that that has sent, you know, through the retail industry, and it affects local communities because look at how many of the jobs that are sitting here are in retail.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
You know, and when they might not be the highest wage jobs, but they're jobs.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And people depend on them. And so here comes a new model, a new way to deliver value to a customer. As a customer, you love it. You get access to goods cheaper, they get shipped right to your home. You know, I don't have to go deal with Route 1 and all the, you know, the strip
Two,
malls,
yeah.
and 2, and
And
like all the stuff.
Seacon.
You know, and so, you know, so from a consumer standpoint, it's pretty good, but from a community standpoint and from a job standpoint, you know, where are the jobs and how do you replace them? But we are just scratching, you know, the surface of this. Last year, I think I read 2.5 million jobs across the country.
Yeah.
You know, that have been already displaced in the retail
Listen,
sector.
Sears
and it's going to
announced-
be double that before we.
Sears announced a gazillion
Yep.
stores closing in February, then in May, another 100, and then yesterday, the day before, another 45.
Yep.
So, yeah, that struggle continues.
Yeah, but this is something, this goes to the, when do you have to innovate? And do you innovate when, you know, you're under siege and you have no degrees of freedom to change anything?
Absolutely.
You know, we always come back to your home industry, the media industry. You know, did you see today the announcement of quote unquote, the alliance?
Yeah.
The large newspapers that are forming the alliance
To
to go
compete.
try to argue that the big juggernaut tech companies, you know, Facebook, you know, Google, you know, are to try to bring antitrust legislation against them. What are they going to do? Break them up, or try to negotiate a better deal so we get paid for the content?
You gotta love a
we're getting?
group of guys
Yeah.
who used to own monopolies in markets,
Yeah.
right?
Who are arguing antitrust.
Arguing antitrust. Listen, I'm sure there was no nervousness in either in Facebook's headquarters or in Google's that the newspaper industry was going to get together. This is about the fourth or fifth time
No, I know.
in the last 10 years that the newspaper industry was
Right.
going to join together to do
Right.
something
Right.
big and strategic.
Yeah, and so so now here comes the alliance, which is what, like the sixth or seventh iteration of a trade group that's trying to lobby on
Absolutely.
behalf of an industry that's under siege. And so my point is, where were you when you had the opportunity?
Is Jeff Bezos going to
Right.
participate in that? I didn't see the laundry list.
I don't know. That's a good question.
I
Because
would
he's on both sides of it.
He is
Yeah.
on both sides,
Yeah.
and he plans on owning both sides of them
Yeah, so
as best
it'll be
he
interesting
can.
to see whether Jeff's involved through the Washington Post or not. But it's too late. I'm sorry, but you can try to create an alliance now. But where were you when you should have been experimenting with different models and integrating digital and finding new ways to
Absolutely.
deliver content? Before these large tech platforms got to where they now have incredible influence, and they're subservient. They create all this news, but that news is getting consumed on sites that are not paying full value
Absolutely.
for that content. So we all suffer because if you don't hire the journalists to go create the in-depth stories, right, and then we don't get the news and we get all this nonsense that
Right.
we get circulating around the world. But on the other side of that equation, it's not like these newspapers are all of a sudden going to get us to pay huge amounts of money for a newspaper, when I can get the news over here on these digital channels. So we should be exploring and testing these different models and how that works, and creating sub-sectors of content that people get access to that they are willing to pay for. We should have been doing it 15 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah, the problem was, listen, I saw it, lived
Yeah,
it, and
right.
participated in it. They were making a lot of money, even if it was decreasing
Yeah.
incrementally, until one day it fell off the table. It functionally fell off the table.
Yeah.
And they made a ton of money
Yeah.
in print revenue.
And so that's the reason that they don't innovate.
That is the reason why they didn't innovate. And in part, a lot of newspaper folks will say the worst thing we ever did was to give away our content on the internet. Well, that's fine, but that's 20 years ago, literally.
Now I'll come back to Rhode Island. So
Sure.
we're the seat of the Industrial Revolution, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah.
All the innovation happened here. I don't know the data. What percentage of the national GDP was here in Rhode Island and in the New England and around the area?
Providence and Woonsocket were
Right.
two of the wealthiest
Oh, yeah.
cities in the United States.
We made the money.
Right.
Right? We made the money here because the idea happened here.
Correct.
And because it evolved from here.
Yeah.
There was no way that we were going to be able to sustain that by continuing to do it the same old way. And so maybe the same thing happened then. We took for granted that we were the innovator here in Rhode Island.
Right.
And new technologies and approaches and ways to serve bigger customer bases happened. And we tried to hold on to what we had.
Yeah.
And then you tell me, have we ever gotten it back
No.
since then? But why can't we go back to that same idea? If we could leverage our assets, our skills, our talent, our size to be the innovator again, we be the place where you can take ideas that create and unleash enormous value
Right.
to first Rhode Islanders, but then ultimately folks in America and around the world. We can become the innovator again because we have what it takes to do it.
Listen,
We
I'm
just
in
need to
full
get on
agree-
with it.
Listen, perfect size,
Yeah.
perfect feeder system, right? Smart kids, lots of them.
Absolutely.
I think it was Paul Salem from
Yeah.
Providence
Yeah.
Equity made the point at a chamber dinner. He was the keynote about 5 years ago. That everybody talks about the education hub in Boston, but the percentage of higher education as a percentage of population is higher in Rhode
Here.
Island. Yeah.
Here. Right.
So,
We
and by
have-
the way, all our schools are good.
Yep.
This isn't, we're a bunch of third tier colleges
Yep.
and universities. This is, take any ranking, we've got numerous schools that are at the top
So,
point.
so let me make innovation a very simple idea. in our discussion. Innovation is just a better way to deliver value or solve a problem. That's
Yep.
all it is.
Right.
Right? And the way to innovate is not necessarily to invent something new that doesn't exist already.
Right.
It's to play with the parts. It's to combine and recombine them to change the way we solve the problem. So to your point, we have the parts. We have incredible colleges
Listen,
and
there's,
universities.
by the way, as you
right?
know, there's no barrier to entry nowadays. There's no IP, right? iPhones developed one day, somebody's knocking it off, 30 days later, competitor has a new, whatever the attributes of the new iPhone are. There's no barrier to entry to build an open source technology infrastructure to do just about anything.
No, but
But your point is correct. It's all about bringing the right pieces together.
Do it to solve the problem.
Correct.
Do it to solve the problem, get a head start, scale it, export outside of Rhode Island, right? And yes, other people are going to then compete with that, but then can move on to the next thing and
Absolutely.
the next thing. So this is why innovation is not just a one-time deal. It's a way of life. You have to always get better. I say the imperative is to get better faster, whether you're an individual, an organization, or a community. And then you go back to the budget conversation we started with. If you want to get better faster, you got to try more stuff. This is my technical, this is my MBA,
Yeah.
Technical talk. You got to try more stuff. You got to play with the parts you have. We're loaded with parts here.
Yeah.
Talent, institutions.
By the way,
but we don't play with them.
and by the way, inexpensive. That's the other advantage here, right? A technologist here is less expensive than one in Boston.
Yeah, but more expensive than some other places.
Yeah.
But we do have the talent. What we're not good at is playing with them, recombining them,
Yeah.
trying it in a different way. Why? Because everybody's playing small ball.
Yeah.
Right? It's this small state syndrome where everyone's trying to hold on to what they have and protect what they have instead of saying, wait a minute, maybe.
Well,
if
you
we
look at all
combine
these elected officials who have
Yeah.
run into trouble, right? Carnevale, Gallison, Kevin Jackson, a few of them. They're not cutting deals with Electric Boat for
Yeah.
$1 billion sent to the Swiss bank
Yeah.
account. These are $5 and $10 and $15 and $20,000 questionable
Yeah. Well,
antics.
did any of our politicians get in trouble because they were thinking too big and they were trying something bold that could change the place? No.
38 studios.
What?
38 studios.
Well, the idea, 38 studios, I would say, okay.
38 studios.
Maybe it was had the potential to be a big idea. It was so poorly executed. The transaction that was proposed was
Insane.
not even close to being what should have been done. If the big idea you're talking about is,
Can
how do
I
we
ask you a
create more
question?
digital media jobs?
When commerce is giving significant amounts of subsidies to entities, why isn't the state getting a piece?
Well, when you say subsidy, you mean actual cash subsidies?
Sometimes
Right.
it's cash,
Sometimes in these discussions, I think we're too quick to put in the same bucket.
Yeah, I
A
agree.
cash subsidy versus leveraging
job
the
credit.
state's faith and credit, to be able to be part of a borrowing scheme to help
Yeah.
them do something. What if it's a revenue bond and there's a lease payment,
Yeah.
that sits behind it? We put that in the same bucket as writing a check.
Yeah.
Why? Because
No,
we're
absolutely.
worried that they're going to cut a bad deal, and 38 studios did that to us. So first of all, I think we got to be a little clearer about what we mean by the nature of the incentives. But your point is still right. We still have written out a bunch of incentive checks. I don't think we've given it enough time to determine what the benefit is going to be. We're right to hold government accountable for where they're allocating our incentive dollars, and then the track record hasn't been good, and 38 Studios is Exhibit A, of why, maybe we should be tough and hard, asking these questions, but we can't be so tough and hard that we take ourselves out of the game completely, right? There are smart deals, there are deals that we should do, and a lot of people around here, not you, of course, but are arguing on principle, instead of the practical nature of, hey, wait a minute, we can make that deal a little bit better, but it's not a bad deal. And you know which deal I'm talking about. But I don't want to get into an argument with you about the process.
No, I'm happy to debate that discussion anytime. Do you have a small ownership
Ah, you
interest
keep
in
that. I have no ownership in it, but I will tell you, having watched a lot of these.
But I will
deals,
say this.
It's not
I
a terrible
watch-
deal that's on
I
the
watch
table.
social media, right?
Right.
And there are 3 attributes of those who defend the Pawtucket Red Sox.
Yeah.
Okay? They are white men.
Yeah, all right,
Okay.
guilty.
They are above 50 years of age.
Guilty.
Okay.
Oh,
There's actually 4. They're baseball fans, exclusively baseball fans.
guilty.
And none of them own season tickets and
Yeah.
put their money where their mouth is. That's the most amazing thing.
Oh, you got me on all 4 counts, because you think that that's gonna stop me
Bill-
from making
Bill-
my argument?
Billy Reynolds defended it the other day, who I love. Billy Reynolds, one of my all-time favorite human beings. And he defended it. Billy Reynolds, first of all, has never paid for anything, let alone going to
It's
a
funny.
game.
It's funny.
So-
Certainly not to go to a ball game.
He's never paid for anything. Let me just tell you that. I've known him for 30 years. I do want to go, there really is some numbers really starting to emerge about Amazon
Yeah.
Prime.
Okay.
And I do want to talk about it. I was with Stephen Pryor the other day,
Yeah.
and I said, you know, I hope you guys are really looking at retail as an issue.
Yeah.
He said, yeah, we've really got to start taking a peek at it. And he said, you know, it's not going to be an overnight issue. I'm not so sure it's not going to be an overnight issue, and I'll tell you where I think it will be an overnight issue. I think it'll be an overnight issue if there's a recession. That a lot of these retailers, major retailers, are heavily leveraged, you
Yeah,
know,
that's true.
and you know, a 12-month, 18-month recession, those things, nobody's lending them any
Yeah.
money, right?
Yeah.
And they don't have assets per se, right? They have leases, everything's on the wrong side. Inventory's on the wrong side in that situation. So you could see this thing go much, much faster. This is not a 5 or
Right.
10-year play. This could be a 36, 48,
So-
60-month play.
So my reaction to that is, yeah, you're probably right. It's probably gonna be, you're talking about online versus place-based, bricks and mortar retail. That could affect some jobs here in Rhode Island and have already. And yes,
Not
that's gonna.
not
yeah.
only jobs in some individual major retailers, but de facto, the way retail is built is, you know, there's flagship stores surrounded by other stores. You know, in the mall, there's a Nordstrom's and there's a Macy's, and all of a sudden,
Yeah, but my argument is gonna be that, yes, you're right, we should be paying attention to that if it's gonna displace people that have those jobs today. But I would be making the argument, regardless of the size of the retail sector
Yeah.
here in Rhode Island,
Yeah.
to say those jobs are very difficult to raise a family, own a home, you know, with.
Yeah.
And so we should be happy to, over time, have fewer retail jobs if we could replace those jobs with higher skilled, higher wage jobs that are more recession proof.
Yeah.
Right? It's not a good thing to have too much of your economy dependent on lower wage jobs. It's
Yeah.
good to have entry level jobs.
Right.
So people can start into the
and listen,
workforce.
tourism
But-
is a massively
Right.
important segment of Rhode Island's economy, and that is, for the most part, an entry-level gateway position
So you
in
need a
which you
certain,
can move into
you
a
need
middle
a certain
class.
number of entry-level jobs, but this is a higher cost place to live than other parts of the country
Absolutely.
and the world. And so in an innovation economy, you're trying to help people with the latter to move to higher wage jobs. There are some of them in retail, but not many. So you're right, if digital, you know, and Amazon displaces some of the actual stores here in Rhode Island, as a consumer, I might be fine. I might get better goods, cheaper, more conveniently to my home. So I might be happy as someone who lives here as a
Absolutely.
consumer. As somebody who's employed in the retail sector, right, and if that's all I know how to do and I can't work in other sectors of the economy, then I'm going to be in trouble. So again, I'll come back. Education, workforce development, let's get people to where they can see a future that isn't a career-long, you know, kind of ringing the
But are
cash
we
register
even, are
at
we
a
even
retailer.
thinking about reusing space? Are we even thinking about what's what's Route 2 going to look like in 10 years?
Oh, I guess nowhere near enough of the, I love it. We always first go, as we should, to the people.
Right.
Talk about what we built to support the way we shop today.
Yeah.
You know, the surface level parking, the strip malls, you know, the malls, you
Yeah.
know, that were economic engines, you know, for those local communities. They were good entry level jobs. I still have my issue with them, you know, if you depend too heavily on that. But look at the physical implications of what happens. Those things grow cobwebs, you know, and the pavement starts to crack, and, you know, and they look like wastelands, you know, really, really quickly, right? So now what do you do if you're a community that's made the bet?
Yeah,
You know,
that's
to have
right.
a heavy retail component
Yeah.
that goes away. The good news is you can now reclaim, you know, parts of your, but you have a lower tax base.
Yeah.
Fewer
Oh,
people pay
absolutely.
Taxes.
Right.
And you have, what do you do with that infrastructure? Other than, you know, plow it under, you know, and do something completely different. We're not thinking anywhere near enough of what the world looks like when we move to these new business models, right, that could produce better wage jobs for our people, but have real implications, not only for people, but for what happens to the place, right, to all that surface parking, all that
Oh, my God.
infrastructure.
I mean,
You know,
think
it's
of
not
that,
like you
like,
snap your fingers
you
and turn
used-
it into something else.
It took
right?
40 years to take beautiful farmland and turn it
Correct.
into a commercial strip. Final thing.
Okay.
You're a, you know, never the braggart. BIF, what's the big update? We need a BIF summit update.
Oh, my goodness, the BIF Summit, September 13th and 14th, is now coming up.
Yeah.
So we are on, one of the things I love about BIF, it's the most inspiring 2 days of the summit for me and for our team. We work together. You've got 25 people sitting over there. No matter what projects they're working on, you know.
They are summiting every day.
They start little by little getting excited about, and we become one team, and it drives the value of the kind of team we're trying to be.
Just so
over
you
at
know,
BIF. Yeah.
we're already talking about it here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're all excited.
And we haven't come to you with the big ask of what we want
No,
you to do. And
no,
but
right.
you guys are ready.
But we have
so
some
like,
big
yeah,
ideas.
Yeah, so get ready for that.
I have to tell you
Yeah.
a funny story. We're out at Anthony Quinn's estate for a fundraiser for the Anthony
Yeah.
Quinn Foundation Saturday night, and it was Ben
Yeah.
Mesrick and the professor from Harvard who's doing all this genome sequencing to
Yeah.
bring back the woolly mammoth. And Ben Mesrick's new book is
Yes,
about
yes,
this.
yes.
So George
Yes, I
Church,
read
who's
that.
globally
Yeah.
famous academic, and the two of them are there, and Kate's talking to Ben, and I'm there, and he said, yeah, I was on CBS this, and I'm on the Today Show there, and he goes, but I kicked off the whole thing with you guys. So his whole
There we
book
go.
promotion, it started with Go Local. So
See, there you go. Never mind the Industrial Revolution. You're bringing back the woolly mammoth.
We are bringing back the
I'll tell you
woolly
one
mammoth.
quick story. As you know, I have one-on-one conversations with every storyteller.
Yeah.
So it's 32 conversations.
Right.
It's 32 of the best phone calls that I have all year round. I just talked with, you may know this guy, David McCauley.
Oh,
So
God,
Rhode Island
yeah,
guy,
absolutely.
Went to RISD,
Yeah.
famous author.
Right.
How Things Work. So I grew up with his stuff.
Brilliant.
Like just brilliant. I love him. He takes really complicated ideas and he illustrates them in ways that we can all understand. And he talks about the journey there. So he's working on a new book. He's been working on it for years, right? And when he works on something, he can only work on it in his studio up in Vermont,
Right.
where he's a recluse up there. I'd love to be a fly on the wall of his studio, where he goes through the journey, and this is a personal story for him. It's how his family came over to the U.S., from the UK, and the transatlantic voyage they had, and then what it looked like to come into New York Harbor and see the Empire State Building. And he's got drawings, he's got all over the place that are going to be part of this book. That's a classic David McCauley, How Things Work.
Yeah, right.
Right, but about his personal story, and he told me on the phone about the story. He's just sending this book to the publisher. It'll probably be another year until the book comes out, but he's going to be on the stage September 13th and 14th at our BIF Summit, and he's going to share the story
That's
and the
great.
drawings
Tremendous.
of this thing. It's incredibly cool. I can't wait to have him share it with us.
Well, we can't wait.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, as always. Congratulations
Thank
on
you.
Carnegie. It's a rock'em sock'em 2017. If we could just get BIF to take over the state budget process,
stop.
we'd be in a much better situation.
Stop.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.